Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. And yes, once again, I am late with the DM guide. I did try this time around, but I have a can't even say the word correctly, valid and plausible reason why. Sunday was Father's Day, and I took a little bit extra time off. I tried to make sure I had videos done ahead of time. That's how I got Saturday going so well. But yeah, things just kind of slipped by me in between work, the magnitude of the sun coming down upon us out in the scrapyard, and, well, just the joys of fatherhood and the like. And I don't mean that with any hint of sarcasm in the slightest. I'm actually enjoying it so much. I still have ended up here today. Also, this is like my fourth time recording this actually, because I wanted to bring a measure of perfection to it, and I kept hitting the 20-minute mark, and I feel like I could do better than that. So, without any further ado, pomp and circumstance, and me trying to throw any valid excuse that'll stick to the wall, let's go ahead and get rolling here with what to do with metagaming. Now, I've talked about this subject a couple of times before, but it's one of those things that comes up that I think does bear some repeating. And this time around, I come before you today with three examples. One is like the most tertiary and technical and very, I think it's a real stretch of an example of metagaming, but I do see the points that people have brought up. I've seen this on different message boards and discussions, not often and usually not to very much applause. Usually everything pulls in the opposite direction, and not without validity, not without reason. But I still feel it works well enough for an example today on metagaming and what to do in regards to metagaming. The second is, of course, an example that is in the middle there. It is an example of metagaming, but it's flexible, it's easy, and really just depends on the DM and kind of the interactions at hand. But the third and final example is absolutely an example of metagaming. So, let's go ahead and dive right into this, shall we? So, like I said, the first example is one that is a bit of a stretch, in my opinion, and I only include it here just as the most bare bones example of like when you really don't need to do much at all in regards to metagaming. Very minimally, in fact, because that's character creation. The example that's been cited before. Oh, hello! I am joined today by my most adorable co-host, Nora, journeyman storyteller and initiate to the seventh circle of lore, comes bearing a strange fruitful orb.
Yeah!
Yes, indeed. It's an orange. It's an orange. Hi. Aw, thank you, little one. I love you. Now, and you be careful with those tones. Those are very important. Very important indeed, little one. You may rearrange them if you like. Thank you.
Okay.
So, that's character creation as the first example of metagaming. The idea behind it is that you should just, in theory, you should just create your character and bring your character to the table without much regard for party composition. You know, covering for each other's faults. Because really, how are your characters really going to be doing that? What are the odds that a fighter, a mage, a rogue, a cleric, and a bard are going to be coming together and form a party? You know, what's wrong with having a party of two fighters, two rogues, or all fighters? All fighters would be much more likely than mages, depending on how common magic is in the setting. But you know, that really just depends. If that's something, if that's something the group wants to go for, then you know, great. But at the same time, if the group wants to coordinate and wants to have something where they have a more balanced party composition, well then, you know, that's fine too. As a DM, you should just, in that instance, adapt to it. Adapt to it and make use of it. You know, there's no reason why the party should not be able to, the players see? She knows. She's telling you. Let the party come together and loud. So So let the party come together and form their party composition and just adapt to it. Adapt the scenario and setting. Or if you want them to build with something particular in mind, then communicate that to them. Let them know the kind of setting that you're going to be throwing them into. That way, everybody's happy right out from the get-go, and you don't have to worry about something unexpected having happened. Now, the second example is one that could go either way, and I believe it's a story I've related on the channel here before, and that was it was a setting that an old friend of mine was running. It's a D20 modern setting where basically the Second American Civil War happened, the European Union collapsed, all that fun jazz, all those horrible things happen that cause the world to basically flip up onto its head and then just kind of shatter and reform. And another friend and I were playing mercenary characters. We worked for this large, military contractor company, and some shadowy cloak and dagger dealings going on with a couple of higher up personnel within the company. Not the entire company is corrupt, but a couple of them have their own double dealings going on the side, and they're working with some pretty vicious mafia families, kind of across the spectrum there. And because we're kind of we caught on to this, and in fact, they tried to kill us at one point. We were investigating, and so things were ramping up, and we were trying to get more help because just the two of us, while our characters were effective, we had some incredible stats, good builds. The sheer numbers just dictated, eventually we were going to get killed, whether it was the third ambush, fifth ambush, or however many. It was just going to keep ramping up and getting worse. And one of the NPCs we'd contacted with was a character we'd worked with previously in backstory. But he'd been part of our team off and on for about 3 years or so. And when we were role-playing with him, with the DM, we contacted him at some point, after we got him roped in with our cause, and I noticed that there was just something terse, short, clipped, not chatty, not with that usual sense of camaraderie that, military squad mates, teammates, and the like, people who've had those shared grinding combat experiences can develop. That wasn't there. He was just very clipped and terse with his sentence structure, and that wasn't like him. So I looked at the DM and said, I think something's up. There's something strange with his voice. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and roll sense motive because I think my character should roll sense motive for that. I do think he'd have an opportunity. And the DM went, you know what? No, you noticed, so I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. You do notice that there is something wrong. But what are you going to do with that information? And so, I'm drawing on backstory and role-playing. I said, you remember when we went to North Africa and that horrible, awful, grueling experience with those different factions fighting over the oil fields and the strait running through there? And he goes, yeah. You ever find yourself in a situation like that again? Yeah, I gotta say I have. Okay, enough said. We'll be over in a moment. And from there, we use that to just kind of a subtle way through using backstory and role-playing to determine, he's been captured, he's in trouble right now. So when we go there, when we go to the meetup, which was at a motel, let's scout the location out from a little bit of a distance, and then we can make a better plan. And we ended up rescuing him, killed his captors, and managed to turn the table on everybody, which was a great moment. But that was something that I noticed as the player, which would technically be metagaming knowledge. And I caught myself, and I offered to roll a sense motive check, and said, let's do this. But the DM decided that because I was paying attention, engaging, and I was doing everything through good role play, he was just going to let me have it. That I noticed something was up, but he challenged me to try through role play to figure out a way to kind of ferret out that information, and he determined that this is a good way of doing this. And that's an example of metagaming being put to good use, but it is something that could be a little bit tricky. And the big determining factor there is what kind of an impact does it have on gameplay. If it's a role play session where there's only like ability or skill checks, no real combat going on, not directly and immediately a life or death situation, then maybe it's worthwhile, if your players are paying attention and engaging in the roleplay, to let them just do a little bit of metagaming if it's not going to harm the overall narrative, if it's not going to provide them an unfair advantage, say in combat. That's an example of where you can let the metagaming slide a little bit because your players are staying engaged. Also, it could be credit to you as well that your players are staying that engaged to begin with, so bravo to you. But that's one that can go either way. The third example is one where definitely you want to kind of keep a handle on things, and that's when it is in combat, when things are more immediately life and death. Like so, when your adorable co-host is scattering valuable and powerful tomes on the floor and celebrating it in her madness. Adorable as it is. But, as an example of this, let's take a type of monster that doesn't come up very often in a combat encounter. And say it's a Grave Knight. You know, your Pathfinder off-brand version of a Death Knight. Not quite the same, definitely some distinct differences there, I would say, but with Grave Knights, they have different elemental attacks and abilities. They're intelligent undead, and they're incredibly dangerous in combat. I love running them and love using them. Although, given how rare they are, they don't come up super often, and I typically use them, if not as a boss, at least a sub-boss who controls a region or portion of the faction that the players are going up against. But with all their elemental attacks, the fact that they're undead, and there's a very particular way that's required to destroy them. May I see that? Thank you. Thank you. And that way revolves around their elemental attacks, because the elemental attacks they have are related to how they died. And typically, most commonly, it's by fire. They're burned alive, burned alive is essentially what it comes down to, whether it's at the stake, in a burning castle, or whatever. They catch a burning missile from a trebuchet to the face. They died horribly, agonizingly on fire, and they were brutal, horrible, effective warlords in life. And that just binds their soul and existence to their armor. So, when you destroy them, if you don't destroy their armor using the element that killed them in life, say throwing their armor into the magma of a volcano, then they're going to reform and come back a short while later, being, a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And once they reform and come back, you bet your ass that they are coming for you right away. But you have to know to destroy the armor. So if the players have encountered that before, but these characters, they're new, they're fresh or whatever, and after they defeat the Grave Knight, they go, okay, I'm going to go collect the armor now, and I'm going to go dunk it in acid, because he's been using acid attacks on us, so we're going to destroy the armor in acid. And if they haven't made any knowledge religion checks, or, knowledge arcana, I would say could be acceptable, especially from a wizard, scholarly sort. From a bard, that's acceptable as well if their knowledge religion is relatively low. Other examples might be a druid, since druids tend to abhor the unnatural. If they use knowledge nature, that could be acceptable. Or a ranger using knowledge nature who has a favorite enemy of the undead, I would say that could apply as well. But that's my own little house ruling and personal rules on the subject of identifying undead creatures and other monsters. So, but besides the point. Point being, they need to make those knowledge checks first to identify that it's undead, or, if it's plainly obvious, they can see the skeletal face, then they need to identify what kind of undead it is. Because it could just be one of those oddball intelligent skeletons that's wearing magic armor and just has been given a magic weapon of some kind. It doesn't come up very often, but it's certainly a lot more common than a Grave Knight would be. And because of how rare they are, you definitely want those checks. And in order to know how to destroy it, you really want them to score high on a roll or have to research it. Now, if they just decided to gather armor because, let's face it, murder hobos are going to murder hobo and they're going to loot everything not nailed down after they kill the boss, they'll take the armor with them, and that's going to set everything up nicely for that grave knight to come back. But that does provide them an opportunity. Say they gather up the armor because they want the trophy, but the party cleric is like, there's something itching at the back of my mind about this. Something about this wasn't right. I'm going to need to study on this a little bit more, find out this grave knight's, this undead's history, because he was intelligent, he used tactics, he spoke to us. Oh, so sweet. What are you doing? Anyways, if they research it and then they find out, oh crap, this is going to come back soon, then they can go about the process of destroying it. Thank goodness they had the armor there. They did get all the pieces, right? Well, there's no way for them to know 100% for sure at that point, which leaves you a little bit of room to say, hey, the armor regrew from this, if there's a piece missing, and it gives you a nice opening to have a recurring villain. But next time they fight them, they'll know to get every single last piece of armor, gather it up, and destroy it properly, and make sure he can't come back. But that's just a few examples of metagaming right there, and what to do about it. In that case, because it's combat, because it's life and death, and even after the combat's finished, because it is a specific kind of undead, if those characters have never encountered it before, and they haven't... Yes, that is a puppy. They haven't made the requisite knowledge checks to understand what kind of undead that is and how to destroy it, well, then they are going to need to be reined in a bit, and you're going to need to tell them, no, you got to make these checks. You have not fought these before, not these characters. Previous characters, yes. These ones, no. So those are 3 examples right there of different kinds of metagaming. Like I said, the first one's a major stretch. But that's also examples of what to do about metagaming as well. It's not all bad all the time. I mean, the Puffin Forest certainly made that pretty clear, that sometimes that metagaming and rules lawyering can be, I guess it's more rules lawyering can be helpful, but you get the idea. Sometimes metagaming isn't so bad, especially if it's getting your players to engage more actively in the role play. But sometimes you gotta rein them in and just make sure that keep that leash a little bit short sometimes. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. I have been joined by my most adorable co-host, Nora, journeyman storyteller and initiate to the 7th circle of lore. And she is performing the Walk of Knowledge right now across all the Jim Butcher books. It's wonderful times. Like I said, I actually do enjoy being a father. It is great fun. But let me know what you thought down below. Click like if you enjoyed the video. If you've been enjoying content here overall so far, well then hell, consider subscribing to the channel. And also, there'll be some videos popping up over this way. Click on those and go enjoy them. With that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all for your time. Have yourselves a good night.